First, I'll have, if you don't mind, just kind of just giving us a little bit of background about the nonprofit, when you started, what your goals are, what you're looking to accomplish.
Sure. Power of the Future is in its seventh year. I started the organization to advocate for energy workers in rural America. Energy decisions are made in DC. They're made in power circles like New York and San Francisco. But the men and women who work in oil, gas, and coal and fossil fuels and pipelines and fracking are in rural America, and they often don't have a seat at the table. And so Power of the Future advocates on their behalf.
Let's talk about the review. Obviously, Fox News Digital picked up on this. We, of course, found this extremely interesting, of course, as well. I mean, so the nonprofit looked into 8 executive orders as it related to climate, from my understanding here. And what exactly did you find? I mean, kind of walk me through what you were reviewing and then also the findings.
So we looked through all the executive orders of the Biden administration that touched upon energy or environmental issues and whittled it down to these eight. And what we found is these eight executive orders, given the size and the scope of the order itself, we found no evidence that the president was aware of these orders, meaning he never spoke on the record about it, was never asked a question by the media, never had an offhand on Air Force One, leaving a room. Not every executive order is a signing ceremony, but there's no evidence that the president himself was aware that that these decisions were made in his name, and we think that's worth investigating.
So the letter, and I read through some of it here, addressing James Comer and calling on an investigation by Congress to look into the 8 specifically, right, that you were able to
Yes.
find that had no evidence behind them.
Yeah, I mean, banning something like the sale of liquid natural gas, the export of liquid natural gas, that's a big deal, right? That should have some commentary by the president. It's not enough to say we have an auto pen signed executive order and we put out a statement on the @POTUS account on Twitter, right? Something of that magnitude. Any comment to the public, and yet they hid Biden from the public. He never spoke about it. He never addressed it. In fact, when Speaker of the House Mike Johnson asked him about it, Biden said he was unaware. At the time, that was interpreted as, oh, Biden, maybe he's a little more foregone than we thought. But actually, maybe he really was unaware because he had no idea the decision was actually even made in his name. That's the problem. They're not just executive orders about naming a day after you on Thursday. These have huge scope in terms of economy, national security, lives and livelihoods. And there's no evidence the president was even aware they were done.
What have you gotten a response? I saw that I believe it was yesterday is when you actually sent the letter in. Have you gotten any type of response from lawmakers?
I have not. Now, I have been asked to testify before Comer's committee next week. That was just made public a couple hours ago, so I can tell you. And it is a lot about these issues, and I definitely plan on bringing it up at the hearing next Wednesday.
Okay, so it is that was going to be my follow-up question here. So you're coming to DC, unless you're already located in DC, next Wednesday to testify before Congress.
Yes. So we're talking about the larger Doge issue and a lot of the green groups and their bizarre funding through these shadow accounts. A lot of that made the news. But this is related because what it seems to be is that when it comes to environmental or energy issues, there's a lot of shenanigans. There's a lot of abuse of systems in place, whether it's funneling money towards pet organizations and profiting, or in the case of these auto pens, getting past huge pieces of executive action without the president's awareness. It seems like people co-opted big parts of this administration for a climate agenda that the president was not fully cognizant of.
Do you think that there could be more executive orders? I mean, either related to climate or not related to climate that maybe follow the same motif here, follow the same theme, that maybe other organizations should be looking into, nonprofit or for profit. But if you found 8 out of the, I don't know how many you looked into, but 8 out of there's a percentage. Could there be more?
Oh, I think every single executive action of the president is worth scrutinizing if the president didn't speak about it, right? I was asked earlier, I'll give an example. I was asked about Keystone. The president spoke about Keystone. On day one, he said he was doing it. I know he was well aware of that decision. So I took that one off the table. But when you're banning offshore drilling on hundreds of millions of acres of land, and he's never asked about it, I question whether or not the president made that decision or the president was in Delaware and someone made that decision on his behalf. I think pardons have to be investigated. I think anything that didn't have a wet signature, wet ink, you have to question whether or not the president was aware that this was being done in his name, or if a staffer just did it, taking a little bit of liberty on the president's behalf.
I don't want to, connect the puzzle pieces here for you, but I mean, what we've kind of learned here within the last week or two about the former president's mental acuity while in office, put Jake Tapper in there. I know you referenced that in your letter to lawmakers as well, but I mean, we're putting pieces together every day here
Yeah.
about what was kind of going on behind the scenes a little bit. And now, of course, Fox News Digital comes out with your review. I'm reading through your review. And it seems like we're kind of chipping away at maybe something that was maybe a larger problem behind the scenes that we didn't know about.
Yes, and if you're a staffer for the Biden administration and you tell Jake Tapper in his book, we were willing to deal with a weekend at Bernie's scenario. We were so worried about the Trump presidency that we were happy to just do undemocratic things to protect democracy, as it has been phrased. Then you're admitting that this would not be a hard decision. If you're willing to say, I'll do undemocratic things to keep Trump out of office, then you're also admitting that you'd be willing to take liberties with the auto pen, liberties with executive action, and act on the president's behalf what you think the president would direct. That's not how the Constitution works. That's not how our government works. And any people who tell me they're going to do undemocratic things to protect democracy, those people are an absolute threat and they need to be put in prison.
The fact that you were asked to testify before Congress next week, does that kind of give you some renewed hope that lawmakers are going to be looking into your maybe launching an investigation based off of your findings?
Yes, that hearing, I knew about that hearing well before this report was announced, but there is a sense amongst lawmakers on Capitol Hill and in the Department of Justice that there are things that have to be investigated, right? We live in a hyper-partisan period. I hate to think every administration is going to spend its time investigating the previous administration, but when the Biden team themselves comes out and says that we knew he was not aware, but we did it anyway, they're the ones who have invited this level of scrutiny. They're the ones who have said that they were taking steps that they weren't authorized to take for the good of the American people. And that intentionality doesn't fly in my book. So I think there's a lot of interest in determining whether or not the entire 4 years of the Biden administration, like Barry Bonds or Sammy Sosa, if it just has a gigantic asterisk next to it for all eternity. And I think that's the direction we're headed.
Anything else that you want to add or mention that I didn't specifically ask?
Yeah, the reason why I'm so caught up on this is because people's lives and livelihoods were destroyed, right? Not every energy worker is ExxonMobil. There's a lot of mom and pop shops. There's a lot of small businesses. There are millions of men and women whose lives were on the line when Joe Biden announced we're banning offshore drilling. We're banning the sale, the export of liquid natural gas. Lives and livelihoods were destroyed. People went bankrupt. Families were broken up. Bankruptcy leads to divorce. It leads to suicide. It leads to depression. People's lives were destroyed because of this. And so my mission here is not just justice for those people, but I want punishment, because we can't live in a society where people are comfortable with silence because they like the power they have. Not when it came to the COVID craziness, not when it comes to climate craziness. People need to go to jail, and I'm not going to rest until the right people are in jail for what they did to those American energy workers.